So good evening, brothers and sisters and comrades. My name is Sukant Chandan. I'm one of the coordinators at the Tricontinental Anti-Imperialist Platform. And the Tricontinental takes its namesake from the Cuban initiative in the late 1960s, which sought to unite the national liberation struggles of the three southern continents, hence Tricontinental. And what we intend to do in our work, and we've been active now for a few years, you can go to our YouTube channel, Tricontinental, to see the playlists and the videos of the other conferences we've done. And what we seek to do is to center and prioritize the struggles and the voices of the actually existing struggles of the people of the non-Western or so-called Global South or so-called Third World. Previous events we've had have included a conference with Leila Khaled on Gaza and the Palestinian Revolution. We've had a conference about Assata Shakur, who's a political exile in Cuba from the Black Panther movement. We've had the Seattle leader of the Black Panthers, Aaron Dixon, come to present his book. And also, of course, the most recent event, which was probably one of our most successful events, and thank you to George Galloway for helping to facilitate that, was our event on Libya itself, whereby Sister Hafsa Kara chaired the event, where we had also Dr. Moussa Ibrahim speaking at. So there's some of the conferences and events we've been organizing before. Today, we are focusing in on Libya again. And the reason being is because Libya remains an absolutely fundamental aspect of our global struggle. Now, we're not going to go through forensically the history of Libya since the revolution of September 1969, and we're not necessarily going to go forensically through what happened in 2011, although I know our colleague Dan Glazebrook is going to touch upon some of that. The focus today, as the title of the event suggests, is about the death squads or the militias who are running havoc, it should be said. They're not running Libya, they're running havoc in Libya. And specifically in relation to that, we're talking about the death sentences that's been meted out by one of these death squad alliances called Libya Dawn, which has a junta based in Tripoli. They're basically occupying Tripoli. I don't think many people in Tripoli are very happy about them dominating the city. Now, I say death sentences, but that's to give too much credit to these depraved maniacs who've handed out this to our comrades and the leadership of the previous socialist, Pan-African, Pan-Arab Libyan Jamahiriya. These people have no right to pass anything on anyone, but the situation is that they have basically kidnapped much of the leadership of the former Jamahiriya. Our comrade and brother Saif al-Islam Gaddafi has also been given this death sentence as well, but it's slightly more complicated than that because he is not under the control and detention of the so-called Libya Dawn. He is with in Zintan with the Zintan militia. But perhaps Dr. Moussa Ibrahim and other speakers can focus in on the complexities around that issue itself. Just a few more minutes of commentary before I introduce Dr. Moussa Ibrahim to our event, who very kindly has accepted our invitation and is in the room virtually with us. But I say virtually, but for us, we are obviously full of appreciation and comradely respect and brotherly respect to him for being here. So although virtually you're here, Dr. Moussa, you are actually, we consider you being here with us. So thank you for joining us. But just a few more comments. Now, recently Sky News made a report and investigation, you may have heard, about one of the leading people traffickers who are taking people across Africa and the Middle East through Libya and sending many people to their deaths. Sky News said this is a leading criminal and people trafficker. However, if we rewound it back to 2011, Sky News would not be reporting that he's a leading mafia people trafficker. They will be saying people like him are revolutionaries and rebels of the Arab Spring. When the British government invited a few of the militia from Libya to England for a military training exercise. They promised to train thousands of the new Libyan army. They haven't even attempted to train a few dozen of them. But when a few dozen of them came to Cambridgeshire last year, these militia showed their true colours, these death squads. They went around the village in Cambridgeshire conducting sexual assaults on women and men. They were stealing alcohol from the local shops. And then they held a press conference defending themselves. Welcome, sister. Defending themselves. And they said, no one told us this was wrong. No one told us this was immoral behavior. And the reason I mention that is, again, these were the leading lights of the Arab Spring for NATO and its allied forces. That when these death squads are conducting their work in Libya, the British government considers it an Arab Spring. The long-time assets of the MI6, who have been wrongly spun as human rights cases, unfortunately by many in the West, including in Britain, depraved maniacs like Omar Dagheas and Hakim Belhaj, leaders of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, when these militias are conducting their wares in Cambridgeshire, they're seen correctly as criminals. But when they are conducting their work for the interests of the British government and leading NATO countries in Libya, they're revolutionaries and liberators of the Libyan people. And it reminds me of something Malcolm X said. Through the Arab Spring and through the NATO operation against Libya, if you listen to Cameron, if you listen to Hollande, if you listen to Hillary Clinton, the great friend of the death squads, and Obama, if you ask them, do you think Libya today is a better place than it was pre-2011? They will say, yes, it's a better place. They have democracy now. They can vote as to who can terribly oppress them sometimes. But the reason I cite Malcolm X is that this Western dream, this American dream, is nothing but an absolute nightmare for our people in Libya and any country which has the misfortune of having forcibly exported onto it Western notions of human rights and democracy. So I just wanted to kind of frame things like just like that, to make it clear about what's happening in Libya. And the last point, this is the beautiful drum we've been banging since the beginning of 2011. The drum is that, and the calling of banging that drum is this, that we have lost something precious in the former Jamahiriya. And particularly the people of Africa have lost something. And I know Sister Hafsa will go into more detail about how, and perhaps the other speakers, of what we have lost and what trauma has been impacted here. But to finish off on this, it's still an issue that extremely few people are focusing in on and taking any notice about. But it's a little bit disingenuous as well, because many people are bemoaning people trafficking of our people into the Mediterranean Sea, into their deaths into the Mediterranean Sea. Many people are bemoaning the fact that there's terrorist proliferation from Libya across Africa in the Middle East. Many people are citing that Daesh, or the wrongly named Islamic State, is conducting awful, depraved, murderous actions. But no one, and this is where the disingenuity lies and is focused on, no one is connecting the obvious connections that the destruction of Libya and what Muammar Gaddafi said in February 2011 has all come to be the truth. He said, "Who are you?" to the rebels. "Who are you?" he asked. And that was the question many of us asked as well, those people supporting the Arab sting in Libya. Who are you supporting? And people didn't want to answer that because people were criminally complicit in that affair from the beginning. But we have to try and tease out and prize out from people to join in this campaign for justice for the people of Libya, be it of Bani Walid, be it of Tawarga, which is no longer there, the town of 35,000, the only town in North Libya of 35,000 dark-skinned North Africans has been wiped out by the heroes of the Arab Sting in Libya, by the wonderfully named Brigades for the Lynching of White Skin. That was a name of a brigade that conducted the Arab Spring or Sting in Libya. But with no more further ado, it's really an honor and a wonderful that Dr. Moussa Ibrahim is here. And when we honor and respect Dr. Moussa, it's not because we are necessarily just respecting the person, Dr. Moussa Ibrahim, although we are as well, because he's played, it has to be said, a heroic role, and a leading heroic role in the Libyan Green Resistance. But when we thank Dr. Moussa Ibrahim, we are thanking all the Libyans in the room. We are thanking all the Libyan families who have been impacted. We are thanking all the Libyans and all their friends who have been resisting this. And since the meting out of the death sentences around a month ago, we saw for the first time since the destruction of Libya that the Libyans, with great courage and heroism, went into the street in their thousands all across Libya and once again raised the green flag of the Libyan Jamahiriya. So it's with that thanks and appreciation and solidarity we welcome and we ask Dr. Moussa Ibrahim to make his contribution. Thank you.
My head on the screen is already very big. And when you say these words, let me tell you, I'm only one of thousands and thousands of Libyans who understood the conspiracy against the country. And we are the majority. There is no doubt about that. How could any regime, any political regime in the world stand against the power of Nato for 8 solid months, bearing and taking in the rockets, the bombs, the bombardment that has no morality and no principles of human rights, and stay solid and fighting. And those who belong to this political regime, as they call it, are still fighting on 5 years after the fall of the country. So I am only one of many, many thousands, and we see many good faces. I recognize some of my comrades among the audience, and I would like to thank them for their efforts and what they do for their homeland. I also would like to thank, of course, those non-Libyans who are with us today, political activists, and people who share with us the struggle for Libya and for many other causes around the world. But Sukant, you have become really professional in organizing these events, and you are one of the very few people around the globe who are able to catch me wherever I am. And please don't change sides. Stay with us, because if you do, we are doomed.
Brother,
wherever I am, whatever continent I'm on, you are always able to contact me and involve me in the wonderful things you do. So thank you very much, Sukant. You are a true hero of the struggle for freedom and against imperialism and against global injustice. I would, this is my third contribution with you, and I think it's better because by now people understand much of what is happening in Libya, but each would have maybe a question or two about a particular thing that they find difficult to understand. So I have, in the last few months, I have found that when I let people ask and I answer, it's much more fruitful and productive. And this is different to, for example, 2 years ago, when people could not even ask a question because they did not know much about what was happening in the country. So I had to speak for a long, long time. So I will speak for a short time, and then I will be very happy to listen to the questions and answer them accordingly. Basically, what has happened in the last 4 years is that Libya is in the most terrible of situations. The main thing is Libya has become the safe parts of Libya space for fundamentalist terrorist groups, and they are very powerful international groups. They are not Libyan-based in their membership. They have thousands of fighters from Asia, from Africa, and from Europe. And they have dominated some important Libyan cities. People, of course, hear about the city of Sirte being dominated by Daesh, the Islamic State, so-called. They hear about Derna, maybe. But they forget that the capital itself, Tripoli, is under the control of Hakim Belhaj. For those who don't know him, Hakim Belhaj is the superstar. He is the Tom Cruise of terrorism in the world. He is a very hard-fighting, hardcore, youngish leader who fought in Afghanistan, who fought in Iraq, within the fundamentalist groups, who killed many innocent people, who planted many bombs in schools and hospitals and streets. And he was captured by the Americans and tortured and regarded as one of the most dangerous people in the world. And now he is the governor of Tripoli, with the blessing of the West, with the protection of the West. And he's doing this through the Libya Dawn alliance of militias that Brother Sukat talked about. So this is the first, the main danger in Libya. And as you know, as all of you understand, the West uses religious terrorism in the Middle East to control the Middle East. Libya never had an Islamic terrorist problem. So they come and they find these people and they arm them and they fund them and they help them plan their organizations and they plant them inside Libya. And then they say, well, look, we have a terrorist problem in Libya. Let's go and invade Libya, or let's control Libya and its future, away from its people. It's the same game played in Iraq, played in Syria, played in Afghanistan. You create a problem, and then you claim that you are the solution. And this is what is happening right now. Libya is suffering from international fundamentalist terrorism, and the West is using that to further empower its control over the country. And then, of course, we have the tribal militias, which are dividing the country into small regions and fighting over wealth and fighting over political power. And they don't even represent their tribes. Anyone who fought in any war would know that you only need 300 or 400 fighters with good weapons to control a whole city or to control a whole region. It's the wonder and magic of modern technology. If you have a few good advanced weapons, all you need is 100 fighters to control a whole city. And this is what is happening. France, Britain, the States, they have organized tribal militias from the 2011 invasion of the country. And they gave them organization, planning, military officers, intelligence officers, weapons, money, and they planted them around the country to keep control of the country. And these tribal militias are isolated even from their own tribes, but they have power and money, and they have aligned themselves with foreign countries, especially France and Britain. Then, of course, apart from the fundamentalists and the tribal militias, you have the politicians in the so-called Libyan government and other political institutions who take orders from the West and from NATO governments, and they implement a policy of division in the country. Libya has been or was a unified, peaceful country for a long time. But these politicians, exactly like they did in Iraq, when they divided Iraq into Shia and Sunnah, and this is on the religious line, and then on the ethnic line into Arab and Kurd, and now in Libya it's divided into Amazigh, Berber and Arabs, and divided into Sunnah and Ibadi, and it's the same thing. The only good thing is that Libya is not as divided socially and religiously as Iraq, which is saving the country from a lot of trouble. But these politicians are working very hard under the command of the French imperialists to deepen the differences between the Libyan tribes, the Libyan cities, and even the Libyan religious groups. And now there's serious talk in some places in Libya about dividing the country into 3 independent regions, which is the dream, of course, of the West and of our enemies, to make Libya, which is already a small country, we are only a country of 6 million, to make it into small regions of 1 or 2 million people. We have, of course, this squandering and looting of the national wealth. The news that came to us today, in the morning, that more than $60 billion, this is $16 billion, have been squandered, stolen from the Libyan budget this year only. And this is direct stealing of budget money. We are not even talking about oil wealth, we're not talking about other assets. This is hard cash. And we have documents that show that international banking mafia is involved in this squandering of Libyan money. They work with the corrupt politicians of the country to direct the money towards banks in Asia and in Europe, with the knowledge of some European governments, because of course they have cut the cake as well. We have, of course, the problem of around 28,000 political prisoners under the control of the armed militias, who are now, I mean, if you think about it, they are not even legally recognized by the so-called international community. They work outside the law, they have secret prisons, and they have known prisons. And just in the prisons that we know and that people visited, and some international organizations visited, we have 28,000 prisoners. All of them for political reasons. Many of them have been executed. Almost all of them are tortured. I will mention to you a very, very sad case that we are mentioning for the first time, and we are announcing this for the first time. We have a very sad case, of the Libyan Minister of Foreign Affairs. Now, this was the minister at the time of the NATO aggressive war against my country. And this guy is known around Libya. His name is Al-Gaddafi, and he is from a well-known tribe in the east of the country. He is a very educated man. He's a very soft and gentle man. He is famous for being, even among the people who fought against us, he's famous for being extremely civilized, extremely gentle and soft and loving on the human level, and politically he was reaching out to everyone, and everything he said during the war was peaceful and was hopeful that we would find a solution for the Libyan problem without NATO. He was imprisoned because he stayed in his home in Tripoli, thinking that he would be treated well, but he was tortured, and he was tortured in the most inhumane way you could imagine. And he stayed in prison for 4 years. He was released only a few weeks ago. And when we tried to visit him and people went to see him, they found that he is in a terrible psychological and mental state. The torture that was executed against him deprived him of his mental health, of his sanity, dare I say. And the guy is really, really in terrible, terrible, terrible pain, that terrible emotional pain. The things he saw in prison, the people he saw being executed without trial, the small young men of 15 and 16 and 17 who were tortured in front of his eyes, the rape he witnessed, all of this made him in a very fragile emotional state. This is an extremely educated, intelligent man who was the Minister for Foreign Affairs. And this is not the only case. We have many other cases. But this man is known to Europe. He is known to the European governments because he was a Minister of Foreign Affairs. And we are trying, now he's in Libya, and we are trying to draw attention to his situation and his case. The death sentences against our comrades, just another proof that there is no justice, there is no state, there is no real political or legal structure that you can have a dialogue with in Libya. This is, again, it's basically NATO contras, NATO's gangs, controlling the country and being protected politically and funded financially and helped in every way by the West, keep Libya in the chaos. We believe this is what the West wants to do, is to keep the country in chaos, so the West can always have the excuse to further control the country, squander the oil money, and make sure, and this is important, that the green Libya never comes back. Many of my friends ask me, what is the main reason you think that the West want Libya to continue in this terrible situation for years and years before they intervene to make some sort of peace in the country and some sort of a stable state? And I say to them because the Western governments are benefiting from the situation in Libya now. Forget about the illegal immigration and the people who come across the sea. The most important thing for the West is the money, the wealth, and they want to make sure one thing, and please remember this, they know that we, the Greens, the Pan-African, the Pan-Black, the Pan-Arab, anti-imperialist Libyans, the Green Libyans, they know we are the majority. They said that to me, many European officials said that to me during the war and after the war. They know we can organize. They know in any democratic, transparent political process, we will win whatever sort of government or political system is in place. So they are terrified that any peace in Libya, the instability in Libya will bring back the children of Muammar Gaddafi. And they know that the children of Muammar Gaddafi are the millions of Libyans. So they are afraid that, not that we just free the prisoners and get rid of the militias and establish a true national democratic for all Libyans state. They are afraid that the dreams and the projects and the principles of Al-Fatah revolution and Muammar Gaddafi will be implemented, that we will fight for Africa again. We will fight for the Arab world again. We will fight with our brothers in Latin America again. That we will finally reach an agreement with our African friends to issue and adopt the African currency. That we will establish finally the African Bank. That we will have the United States of Africa, the dream of Gaddafi. That we will have Satan. I talked about Satan before. I don't know whether you have heard about it. But Gaddafi, when he went to Venezuela in 2010, only 1 year before the war, he agreed with his comrade Chavez and other Latin American leaders that Africa and Latin America should establish Satan as opposed to NATO. That we would have military cooperation between the two continents. These things, these dreams, these projects scare the hell out of Western governments. And they are afraid that we will implement it. That's why they are afraid of Islam. That's why they are afraid of Abdullah Sunusi. That's why they are afraid of Abu Zaid Dor. They are naming my comrades in prison. Because these are the people who know all of the secrets and all of the deals, all of the projects and all of the files that we have as a revolution, and they know all of the links to all of the leaders around the world in Latin America and in Africa and in the Arab world. And if these people in prison come out, they will give us a push forward, and they will help us revive the dreams of Al-Fatah revolution, Al-Gaddafi revolution. That is why the situation in Libya is as it is. Of course, I would like to end with my notes with saying that never feel depressed about. Sometimes when I describe the situation in Libya, people really become depressed. I could see them in the faces, and people go, "Oh God, another failed dream." I assure you, we are now much better, much stronger, much more unified than we were than we were a year ago. Libyans, even who were tricked by Tito's conspiracy, are coming back to us. We have fantastic, real, and powerful understanding with most of the tribe in Libya. We are very strong inside the country, and we are ready to take back Libya when the circumstances are right. We will do it peacefully. We will do it with political and social tribal work. If the militia supports us, we will be ready to defend ourselves. But I am extremely hopeful that within a particular time frame, we will be able to regain Libya from these armed militias. Thank you for listening to me, and please feel free to ask me any hard questions. Never have a question in your head and say, "I do not want to embarrass my comrade Moussa." At all, please give me the hardest of questions. I'm used to it. I'm used to what I'm saying. Any question from you would be welcome, because I know your questions will come from pure and honest hearts and minds. And I know that all of you are concerned and you want to understand what's going on and what the future shall be like in Libya. Thank you, Sukan. Thank you, every one of you, for listening, and I'm ready for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Moussa. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take 2 questions from the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moussa, for your introduction. I would like to ask about the position of the West after the terrorism attack take place in France and Sousse and Tunisia, and have left lots of victims. So what do you think about the position of the West now after the threat has reached the heart of the people. France, Britain, the other part, Belgium, there have been lots of extremist incidents took place across the Europe. So, can you please explain what's the position now of the West?
Thanks, Munir. And Dr. Moussa, if you just don't mind, I'm going to take another question, so then you can take them two together. Thanks, Munir. Anyone else, please?
Actually, I have one, if you don't mind. You mentioned Abdul Hakim Belhaj and the rendition program. I want to know actually what happened in between the time he was returned to Libya and he started the led the rebellion. What happened? How to him?
Okay.
Thanks, Hafsa. So, Dr. Moussa, if you don't mind responding to those two things.
Okay, well, the first question, I'm the spokesperson.
Yep, go ahead.
For the first question about what the West's position on, the situation after the terrorist attacks around the world, and Tunisia especially, and France. Well, I'm the spokesperson of the Green Resistance. I'm not the spokesperson of the West to explain their position. But very simply, the West never take any false hopes from the West. Many people think, oh, now the West will fight terrorism in Libya and maybe will help liberate Libya. And some people can fall for that. You need to understand that the West is against us, against freedom of Libya. When I say the West, of course, I mean Western governments, in particular Western governments. So I do think that the West will use the situation on the ground, the terrorist attacks in France, in Tunisia, in Libya, the terrorist operations in Libya, like the massacres Daesh committed in the city of Sirte and other places, to maybe intervene militarily in the country, maybe to advance their agenda in the country. There are many possibilities, but do not hope that because there is terrorism, it means the West will suddenly become a friend of the Libyan people. I give you an example. Think of Iraq, think of Syria, think of all these countries which suffered from terrorism for 10 years and more. And what is the West doing? Is the West stand with the Iraqi people, with the Syrian people, with the Afghani people? No. They are implementing their own agenda and keeping these countries as failed states, because this works for the West. As for the second question, it's very, very important and interesting, but we really need, you asked me to be, and this is a major question, define a whole era. But briefly, when he was brought to Libya, it wasn't just him, it was a program in which dozens of very important and active terrorists were brought to Libya from different prisons and locations in the West. We treated them extremely well, and this is testified to by international human rights organizations. They all praise Libya for the way it treated these terrorists. And we had a dialogue, a program that was led by Brother Saif Islam Muammar Al-Gaddafi, in which we talked to these people. We brought in religious scholars, we brought in philosophers and thinkers and tribal leaders. And throughout the years, from 2006 until late 2010, we arrived with them at an agreement that they will abandon their old ways and that they will join the society and that they believe now Islam is a vision of peace and it's against terrorism and against violence, and that Islam can be democratic and that Islam is pro-women and pro-children and everything. And they wrote that. They actually wrote that down in a very, very famous unpopular book that is now a joke, and that was printed thousands, and read by many scholars around the Islamic world, and many Islamic authorities came out to praise work Saif al-Islam did and the Al-Fatih revolution did with these terrorists, and we put them out in daylight, gave them compensations, we gave them houses, every single one of them had a house, had compensation for the years of prison, for good money, and they were instated in jobs, some of them, many of them, because they were well educated, they were teachers at universities, they went to mosques, and we thought that this was an amazing journey that Libya did, an amazing solution. The West, I remember myself, the States and Britain especially, they praised Libya for what it did. But little we knew that the West was actually connecting with these people and conspiring with these people. And this came out during the war and after the war. Hakim bin Haj himself admitted that he had negotiations and talks and secret agreements with the West. He talked about it, he made a mistake, and then he shut up. I think someone told him not to repeat it, he said. But he was captured, and he said, in a kind of passing way, that we know how to deal with the West, we have our agreements before the war, and we know what the West wants from us and what we want from the West, and we are no threat to them, just want to establish Islamic State in Libya. So that's briefly. If you want to know more another time, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Moussa. This is actually a very important thing that Hafsa and yourself have been discussing, because Hakim Belhaj has had an article published in The Guardian where he presents himself as a human rights victim by the British and Americans and by the Jamahiriya at the same time. And also, I know we have a colleague here who's from an organization called Campaign Against Criminalizing Communities, who do a lot of good work. But also, Hakim Belhaj and Omar De Gayas have managed to infiltrate human rights campaigns in this country.
Yes.
So I think it's important for us, for everyone in the room, to really grapple with this seriously. Because I've approached a very well-known human rights lawyer. She's world-known. Everyone knows her.
Okay.
I had a conversation with her saying, why are you defending lynchers and rapists, people who are leaders of Daesh and these death squads in Libya? And everyone becomes very silent and they don't want to have that conversation.
Money. I'm going to mention this publicly, maybe for the first time. I would like to draw your attention to the role Turkey plays in all of this. Abdel Hakim bin Haj and the Islamists in Tripoli, they all have billions of dollars in Turkish banks and Turkish cities. And Turkey is their mediator. It's helping them with, of course, I'm talking about the regime in Turkey, because it's a fundamentalist regime that supports terrorism and helps these terrorists with their work in the West. Okay.
Thank you, Thank you, Dr. Moussa. I'm going to ask Hafsa Kara to make a contribution now, if that's okay. Sorry, it's Dan first, my mistake. Yeah, Dan, if you don't mind making your contribution, if that's okay, Dr. Moussa, he's going to speak.
Yes, absolutely, I'm honored.
So Dan will speak for about 5 to 10 minutes, probably more around 10 minutes. If you could keep it to that would be really helpful, Dan. Then if you've got any additional comments or questions to Dr. Moussa, and I know Dr. Kamila, you have your hand up. If it's okay, I'll take you after Dan, if that's okay, and Roshan as well. I see you both. We'll take a round of comments and questions after Dan's contribution. Probably mostly directed at Dr. Moussa, I'm assuming. So please, anyway, sorry to just give a brief introduction to our comrade Dan Glazebrook. Dan, and if you don't mind me saying that, I collaborate to some extent.
To a large extent.
Thank you. But I gave some assistance to Dan in his publishing of his book, which is mostly actually on Libya, and it also touches upon Syria and some other subjects as well. along with Francis Boyle's book on Libya, Cynthia McKinney's edited book, Maximilian Forte's book, Horace Campbell's book. I don't know if I've left out anyone else. I think that's about it, really.
Those are the good ones.
I'm not going to mention the dud rubbish books that totally whitewash everything, obviously. But apart from those 4 books, Dan's book, Divide and Ruin, The West's Imperial Strategy in an Age of Crisis, are the go-to books to go to if anyone wants a serious anti-imperialist analysis, and an analysis that doesn't fit the NATO kind of framing of the issue. So Dan's done some brilliant work. You've probably seen him on Russia Today on RT, advocating about Syria, Egypt, and Libya and other issues. So please do welcome Dan Glazebrook, who's going to speak about.
Thanks, Sukan, and it's a great honor to be in the room and hearing in person from Moussa Ibrahim, who is a great and tremendous voice of reason throughout 2011 and since. One of the few voices of reason in 2011 in the English language that occasionally got some airtime. And thanks to Brother Sukan for organising the meeting. Sukan, long-term political collaborator and comrade, and great inspiration to me over many years. I wanted to just quickly comment on the Tunisia attack, the Sousse attack, and I think we should be really clear that although it was an attack on British tourists, it was not an attack on British interests. In fact, quite the contrary, it was an attack on the Tunisian economy, first and foremost. Because the economy is so heavily reliant on tourism. And actually what this attack has done by damaging the tourism industry and the Tunisian economy, it's actually going to make Tunisia more dependent on the IMF that it had been trying to break away from. And as a key player within the IMF, that's actually in the interests of Britain, that Tunisia is being made more dependent on the IMF as its own economy is faltering and stumbling. So, just because the people who run the British government and British imperialism are racist, it doesn't mean they have any love for their own people. An attack on British tourists is of no consequence to them if it furthers British interests, and I believe this attack actually does. Onto the death sentences that have been announced in Libya. These death sentences are based on lies, and they're based on the very same lies, the exact same lies that the NATO destruction of Libya was justified on. If we look at the actual charges against Saif Al-Gaddafi, for example, the charges were recruiting mercenaries, attacking civilian targets from the air, forming armed groups and shooting into crowds of demonstrators, and incitement of murder and rape. Now, not only is every single one of these false in the case of Saif, but every single one of these are things that NATO actually used these false claims to do themselves to the people of Libya. If we look at these claims one by one, first of all, the use of mercenaries, and this claim was repeated throughout the Western media again and again. African mercenaries, the racism of the whole narrative was very obvious, has been analysed in detail by Maximilian Forte in particular, has done great work on this. But there were no African mercenaries, so-called, being employed by the Libyan government. What there were African migrants and black-skinned Libyans who were being lynched en masse from the very first day of the rebellion as a part and parcel of the rebellion itself. On February the 18th, remember the rebellion started on February the 17th. On February the 18th, 50 African migrants were herded into a cell in a police station in Al-Baida that had been taken over by the rebels and were burnt alive in the cell. This was on day one of the insurgency. The BBC, even in one of its early reports, was kind of never mentioned again, when in one of its earlier reports had interviews with terrified African migrants who talked about 70 or 80 of their colleagues being literally chopped to pieces. So these things were known about, and they were part and parcel of the rebellion from day one. Amnesty International, to its eternal shame, parroted these claims, these false claims about mercenaries. But when it actually decided to investigate the claims, itself had to admit that there was not a single African mercenary that they could find any evidence of. I have to say this, though. If there had been people being paid from across Africa to come and defend Libya in the face of NATO aggression and NATO-inspired rebellion, I personally would have no problem with that. Could there be any more honourable work, actually, than helping to defend a fellow African nation from the aggressor, the aggression of the colonial powers? And how hypocritical is it? How much more hypocrisy can there be that NATO and the NATO powers, these are powers that wiped out Pakistan's debt in exchange for Pakistan's collaboration in bombing Afghanistan. These are the powers that give Qatar diplomatic and military privileges in exchange for Qatar conducting regime change and being at the forefront of regime change across the Middle East, and actually provided the ground troops to overthrow the Libyan government in Tripoli. These are the powers that in Iraq, to cover their own supposed and fictional withdrawal in Iraq, just simply replaced the soldiers with outright mercenaries from companies like Blackwater and Soundlines. How hypocritical for these very powers to claim anyone is dependent on mercenaries when their entire operation globally is completely dependent on mercenaries of one kind or another to do their bidding. The truth was there were no mercenaries being employed by the Libyan government, and this was a lie, a very deliberate lie that was being created to serve three specific purposes. Firstly, to justify the lynchings, the mass lynchings that were going on of African migrants and black-skinned Libyans. Secondly, to actually demonize any and the millions of people within Libya that were opposed to NATO and opposed to their proxies on the ground. Because this didn't fit the narrative, that it was the people against the government. So any people who were with the government were instantly demonized as foreign paid agents. It's complete nonsense. And the third reason for this lie, we mustn't forget that the original calls for a no-fly zone were justified because they needed to stop these plane loads of African mercenaries that were apparently being shipped in. So it was actually to justify the so-called no-fly zone. That was actually completely to do with destroying the country and nothing to do with preventing flights. So that was the first claim. The second claim against Saif and the second justification for the war itself was this idea that the government was attacking civilian targets from the air. This was based completely on the highly dubious testimony from two Libyan Air Force pilots who quit the Libyan Air Force. There was no footage of this. There were no craters or evidence of any attacks. None of the evidence that if it had actually happened would have been impossible to hide in this age where everyone has a mobile phone and a camera and access to the internet and so on and so forth. So this never happened. And again, what hypocrisy that NATO used this false claim so that they themselves could spend 7 months precisely bombing civilian targets from the air. Whether it was the factory producing the water pipes for the distribution of water around Libya, or whether it was Gaddafi's baby grandchildren, who now the foreign minister of this country, of Britain, and then the defense minister, Philip Hammond, overtly and explicitly justified the targeting of Gaddafi's baby grandchildren on the grounds that would, quote, create psychological pressure on their grandfather. The third accusation against Saif was shooting into crowds of demonstrators. Now, I just want to refer to the work of a professor at Texas University, Alan Cooperman, who, if you're not aware of his work on Libya, you should definitely look into it. He points out that the uprising began in Libya in 5 cities. In only one of those cities was it peaceful, in Zawiya, I think, he claims. And there the authorities dealt with it peacefully. In the other 4, it was violent from the start. And only then, when there were armed groups shooting and killing policemen and soldiers, then, yes, indeed, the authorities responded with force, as any country in the world would do when its police and soldiers are being killed. He says, and this is a quote, he says, in every single case, in those early days, it was the protesters who resorted to violence first. So this claim about shooting at peaceful protesters never happened. They were shooting back at armed killers, is what was happening. Even when they resorted to force, the authorities actually never, at first they did not resort to lethal force. And we know this, that they were shooting to wound, because the admissions into the hospital in Benghazi, most of the admissions were people who'd been shot in the leg. So they were not people with chest wounds or head wounds. Their orders had been to shoot to wound, even when they themselves were being shot at. And again, this is a quote from Alan Cooperman. He says, actually, throughout the entire 7 months of the war, this is a quote, he says, Gaddafi was actually being extraordinarily careful to avoid civilian casualties. And from however you measure that, that's entirely clear. He gives the example of Misrata, where he says 257 people were killed, I think, in the first 3 months. And he said, look, if you were indiscriminately dropping bombs from the air and so on, indiscriminately firing a city of 400,000, you could kill 257 people in 3 minutes, let alone 3 months. Okay. And again, what hypocrisy. What hypocrisy to give a death sentence to Saif for shooting into crowds of peaceful demonstrators, something that never happened. When just 3 weeks ago, the beginning of August, in protests in the southern Libyan city of Sabah, protests against these very death sentences, where there were genuinely peaceful protests, and the very militias that sentenced Saif to death opened fire on the peaceful demonstrators, killing at least 4 people just 3 weeks ago. Where are the death sentences for the people who ordered that? Well, of course there are none, because this has nothing to do with justice and everything to do with an attempt, and a futile attempt, it should be said, to wipe out all traces of the progressive, socialist, Pan-African anti-imperialist government of Libya that it once had. And finally, the claim of incitement to murder and rape. Once again, these claims of mass rape, these were widespread in the media. Once again, they've been completely demolished by Amnesty International once they actually investigated it. And once again, to their shame, Amnesty were actually parroting it at the time, but only later on realized that it was nonsense. The kind of evidence that the rebels were putting forward for the claim that mass rape was being used as a weapon of war were things like on completely burnt out tank shells of the government, they were finding mint condition boxes of Viagra in there, just complete nonsense, and demolished as such by every credible investigation subsequently carried out. This war was completely based on lies that have been exposed again and again, and yet these death sentences have been justified on the same lies. They must be opposed. Thank you.
Dr. Moussa has left the screen. I'm sure he'll be back within a few seconds. He did that at previous conferences as well. So I'm going to take a few contributions from the floor, if that's okay.
I have a question because you were a part of the previous regime, and many people now, both sides from Libya, both sides, the Green and the Home, believe that was revolution in 2011. They really blame single Islam for being the one who used against Libya by making deals with the opposition groups, and Islamic groups were part of them, and Islamic fighting groups were part of them, and deliberately and unconsciously he participated in the chaos of Libya that time and the conspiracy of Libya. So what do you think? This was, I know that was under the pressure of the human rights organization, but what do you think? And I need to direct a word to people who believe that secular Islam is a part of the conspiracy in Libya.
Thank you, Sister.
Thank you for a very informative talk and to that as well. It shows appearances and reality don't actually coincide. I would like to ask you in particular about the UN's role in Libya, what their function is vis-a-vis the different political factions and parties, and their main function and your own party's relation to the UN. I don't necessarily have a high opinion of the UN. I saw how the UN operated in the peace process in Nepal, where Ian Martin was head in Nepal. He was then appointed to Libya. So I'm curious of any information, how they work, etc. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Roshan. Now, Dr. Moussa, I'm sorry to say this to you because I wish we had hours, but we don't have too much time this evening.
Yes.
But if you could succinctly answer those two things, please.
Sure. The first question was our friend asking about secular Islam's role in bringing these as traitors into the country, and well, I hear people saying that. Okay, Saif al-Islam is a decent young Libyan. He is the son of our leader. He had particular political opinion. He was leaning towards the West, and he thought that Libya can establish some sort of peace and good, healthy relationship with the West. He is educated in Britain, and because of his innocent enthusiasm, he wanted to be a good link, firstly, between our country and its children, even the stray children. And he thought also he would be a link between Libya and the West. And he did his best. He was misguided. He made mistakes. But when the war took place, he proved himself to be brave and courageous, and he was true to his homeland. If Saif al-Islam wanted wealth or wanted power or wanted personal gain, he would have joined NATO, because it's from the beginning clear which side had the power and the wealth and all of the attractions. He refused. I'm a witness to this. He was offered by the West, Saif al-Islam. He was offered, power and wealth and the government and everything. He refused. He completely and utterly. He discovered the conspiracy. He understood that the West wanted to give Libya to the terrorists, and that he wanted to take Libya away from its true identity. So although he might have made mistakes, we all make mistakes, but he made them in the best of intentions, and we all thought that he was doing good things, and now he's paying the price. I mean, Abdul Hakim al-Haj is sentencing Saif al-Islam to death. He doesn't even have the human decency to be nice to Saif, at least personally, because Saif saved him from death, brought him from Guantanamo Bay, gave him money, gave him power, gave him love and understanding, and made him into almost a national, some sort of a hero for going against terrorism and declaring himself a new man. So, but they don't have this decency. So Saif al-Islam is a decent, courageous, young Libyan man who did the right thing during the war and afterwards. As for the second question, the UN, the way it's structured, makes it a very powerful and good tool for global imperialism. Because the UN, the way it's structured, it concentrates its real power into the Security Council, not the General Assembly of the UN, where countries are. And as you know, in the Security Council, we only have 15 members. Is it 5 or 6 of them? 5 have the veto privilege, and they use it to attack countries, to give legitimacy to wars. And the UN is following the orders and command of the West step by step, and we do not have any respect whatsoever for any work the UN does in Libya, even when sometimes it comes out and says good things, like it condemns the illegal prisons in Libya, the bad or violent treatment of protesters. Sometimes it talks in a kind of shy way about the supporters of a green Libya. But all of this is part of the game. It's part of the film, of the script they play. So we do not really think that the UN can do anything to help us. So thank you. That's briefly.
Thank you, Dr. Moussa. I'm going to move swiftly on now to another stalwart comrade and sister of ours. And although pre-colonialism, it's typical me to talk about 5 centuries framework, but before colonialism, the people of the non-European world were coming to know each other slowly but surely. It's one of the coincidental offshoots of colonialism becoming a global system that they speeded up us colonized people to know each other a lot quicker and a lot more closely because we had a common enemy in colonialism. And I mention that because it was the Arab sting actually that made Hafsa and I cross paths. It was on a TV channel where we were both advocating against the NATO project on Syria. And it was real wonderful to meet a comrade like Hafsa, but also particularly someone from a country we all should be very proud of. It's another African and Arab, North African country that's still standing tall and proud, and it's still one of the great barriers to neo-colonialism in its attempts on Africa, and that's the Algerian Republic as well. And of course, the contribution that the Algerians have made for many generations, particularly their liberation war and post-liberation, in supporting nearly every liberation struggle and liberated country, is really a very lofty position that Algeria holds. So it's really honored that we have one of the daughters of Algeria with us. And just finally, not only a daughter of Algeria, but a very eloquent one and a very insightful one. Sometimes we battle and really disagree with each other, but it's always a pleasure and honor to work with such a comrade like Hafsa. So please welcome Comrade Hafsa to the event.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the very kind introduction. Can I just say that although I'm not very generous in my praise and my compliments, I would have to thank very warmly Sakant for being, I would have said, one of the only people who works tirelessly to promote the Green Jamhuriya program. But actually, as far as I'm concerned, he's the only one I know. And this really is an element that is very much central to our comradeship, but also to our friendship. I think he really is very loyal to the Jamhuriya, and I think that is something very commendable. So thank you again, Sakant. One of the things that we often hear about, one of the other myths that we often hear about Gaddafi is that he turned towards Africa as a result of his disappointment in the Pan-Arabist project. That's a complete lie. Gaddafi was instrumental in unifying the African continent between the north and the south, and he worked tirelessly to help all the African causes from day one. And I think it's important that Sukan does mention colonialism, because one of the consequences of colonialism was create a gap between the north, the sort of fair or whiter north, the Arab north, and the south, the sub-Saharan Sahel region of Africa. And it created a division, although pre-colonialism, a lot of interaction between the kingdoms of Timbuktu, the kingdom of Morocco, and all the other regions. I mean, there was strong connections across the African continent that was destroyed as a result of colonialism. And what Gaddafi did was really try and strengthen and unify the continent once again. And of course, the lynching of black Libyans wasn't just an act of racism, it was an act of rejection of his pro-African policies. The killings were very symbolic of a rejection of everything that Gaddafi did and everything he stood for. And the fact that it happened with the complicity of a racist and colonialist West, I think says a lot about the project and the ambitions that the West has for our continent. But I'm going to bring a dampener really to this talk, because I know Moussa said he was very hopeful, but I was very, very disappointed as an African in regards to what happened to Libya. This was an African nation that was brought to its knees, that has been destroyed today, and really the continent failed it completely. That we've heard the odd voices here and there of condemnation. Yes, even my own country did its bit. It refused to allow, the NATO planes to bomb Libya from Algerian airspace, and it gave asylum to Gaddafi's family. But really, no African country went far enough to stop this catastrophe. And while all of us, or many of us in this room, and in particular in the West, went out and marched and condemned the criminal invasion of Iraq, we all stood idly by while the criminal project of the destruction of Libya happened. And of course, it's even more unforgivable on the part of Africa, which literally just stood by and didn't do anything. So I think we're at a moment where we need to bring home some truths about what is happening on the continent. And I think also I would attempt to address also many of the Pan-Africanists who are in the West, who somehow they claim they have a connection through their ethnicity to the continent, but actually what they do is they don't talk with Africa, they talk to Africans. They might have spent maybe a month in an African country, a bit like middle-class English people go to India to find themselves. They go to Africa to slightly discover some origins, but actually in the end they come back and they address Africans the way the white colonialists addressed Africans. They speak to them and not with them. And they promote a often very divisive discourse, but when push comes to shove, they're nowhere to be seen. When an African nation was destroyed, they were nowhere to be seen. Where black people were placed in human zoos, they didn't raise their voices. So this is as much an accusation, of course, of Western policy towards Libya. But to be honest, are we surprised? Is there anything new in what the West has done to Libya? Is it any different to what it did to Iraq? There is no surprise when it comes to NATO and when it comes to the West. There is deep surprise and deep shame and embarrassment, I have to say, when it comes to what Africa did. Africa failed one of its sons, and I think the result here is telling today. I'm not going to speak too long because, of course, we've all seen the images of the African migrants drowning in the Mediterranean, and people seem to be surprised. Oh, look, it's horrible, it's shameful what we're seeing, little body of a 4-year-old floating in the sea. Well, we didn't see that prior to 2011. That didn't happen prior to 2011. So what is happening today in the Mediterranean is a consequence of the NATO onslaught on Libya and the destruction of Libya. Gaddafi worked tirelessly to unify the continent, and he devoted the wealth of Libya to improving the lives of Libyans, but of course also to improve the life of Africans who were not traveling in their hundreds and in their thousands in makeshift boats to reach European shores. He attempted to offer alternatives to scores of African countries and to encourage them to develop the continent the way it should be. Because, of course, the other shame is that although Africa is viewed as some sort of poor, weakened continent, it is actually the continent that is feeding the planet. The planet could not function without African resources. We have the means to be fully independent, to rise up and tell the West where they can go and what we should do with our own countries, but we're simply not doing that. So I think once again we need to come back and be honest about our failures. And I'm speaking here, of course, as an African. We really need to be aware of our failures in order to ensure that what happened to Libya doesn't happen to another African nation. Now, many of you will remember Gaddafi's speech at the Arab League, where he addressed fellow Arabs to tell them, well, one of you can be next. And a lot of them smiled and sniggered. The tragedy is that he proved to be the next one. But I think there is a similar speech to be made at the African Union to say, look what happened to Libya. One other African nation can be next. We really need to work tirelessly to stop that, to continue the legacy of Muammar Gaddafi, who was, if not the one of, but actually the only African leader who really, really never failed Africa at no point, at a great cost to his life, at a great cost to the stability of his country. And I think the only thing that we could do today, in particular to the Africans in the room, is if we want to remember and honour his memory and his legacy, I think is to work towards a unified Africa. But prior to doing that, we need to accept our failures, to engage positively amongst ourselves to say this should never happen again. And hopefully, I think, work in similar context to actually promote the cause of the Green Revolution. Because as things stand, although we're here in this room and we're all talking and we're showing interest in Libya, and I think we all share this common interest, it doesn't stop the minute we leave the room. It actually starts, the work starts when we leave the room, because we really need to make sure that what happened in Libya should never happen again, and promote the cause of Libya as best we can. As I said, you know, the problems that we're seeing in the Mediterranean are a direct cause of the NATO invasion. And I think if there's anything to take from it, is that the catastrophe in Libya isn't just about Libya turning into a failed state. It's about the consequences that the catastrophe in Libya will have across the entire continent and for many, many years to come. And I think if we work at least a little towards changing hearts and minds and making sure that this never happens again, I think we might see some improvement. But we really need to take a hard look at ourselves and say that we failed Libya and we should never fail it again. Thank you.
Thanks, Hafsa. I remember during my visits to Libya, I spoke to a very prominent senior diplomat, an ambassador to Libya by a very leading African country. I don't want to embarrass him and his country, where I was very angry and annoyed and upset. And I said, "You're next." And he says, you're right, we are next. And he told me how they're going to plan the attack on regime change on his nation. Subsequently, I've spoken to several other senior diplomats across Africa, and I've lobbied them and advocated exactly the critique that you've made. And some of them are trying very hard to having a proper critical debrief, sorry to use that technical language, in terms of the destruction of Libya. So I think we need to continue developing that critical dialogue with them. Before I ask the final speaker, I'm going to ask the final speaker to come in right now, and then we can have a final question and answer and discussion with Dr. Moussa and amongst ourselves. So please, Doctor, welcome Brother Munir, and then we'll have more discussion afterwards.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Munir Hamza. I'm one of Dr. Baghdadi Mahmoudi relative. Tonight, I would like to put you in a situation, a humanity situation of Dr. Baghdadi Mahmoudi and his colleague before and after receiving the date of sentence. Basically, Dr. Baghdadi Mahmoudi was born in 1952 in the city of Jubail. He has been educated to the academic level, the PhD, and has led the health sector in his city 1990, and then the human resource minister in 2000, and then has been elected as Prime Minister of Libya in 2005. And in 2011, Dr. Baghdadi Mahmoudi has decided to support his own people and to support his country. Before that, Dr. Baghdadi Mahmoudi has afforded his time and has provided his country with lots of development as an MP of Libya, and he was a very hard worker for his country. Dr. Baghdadi Mahmoudi has defended his country in 2011, and after the failing of the regime has kept the neighbor country Tunisia, and instead the Tunisian government, instead of giving him asylum and humanitarian protection, has been detained in a Marnabiya prison, and then in 2013 has been handed by finance deal, which is by Jibali government, who is the MD of Tunisia in that time, 2013, and has been surrendered to the militias in Tripoli. Since 2013, Dr. Mahmoudi has been detained in Tripoli in detention center under the control of those extremist Islamic groups led by Abdul Hajj and his colleagues. And since that time, Dr. Mahmoudi has not had any rights, no access to his health rights. They have abandoned his family to visit him. His mental health issues has been extremely increased. We have noted also, honestly, his health has completely been destroyed. He suffers from diabetes, high blood pressure, and has not got access to any of those. So today, I would like to put you in his humanity situation, and I would like to ask a question to all of us, all of you. What is the international community who came in 2011 to protect civilians in Libya? Where's the Human Rights Watch organization? We haven't seen, even after the date of sentence, which is basically Dr. Mahmoudi and his colleague has received a few weeks ago. Where's the media? Where's the world? Where's the human rights? I mean, honestly, people are in struggle everywhere. It's not Dr. Mahmoudi and his colleague. All across the country, they are, suffering. They are struggling. Honestly, I couldn't understand the situation. Where's the people? Where's the world? Who were 2011, and we have seen that all of this propaganda around the media. So today, I think about you and the situation of Dr. Mahmoudi and his family. The situation is quite miserable, and we seek all of you and the national community, anybody who can help with their situation, who could help us to rescue our people. Thank you so much for your conversation.
Thank you, Brother Munir. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the last round of anyone who wants to make a contribution or question, and then I'll ask Dr. Moussa Ibrahim to make his final responses and comments, and then we'll close the event if that's okay.
I just wanted to direct this kind of question or comment to the sister, sorry, I've got you. Hafsa. And you mentioned, I guess, a poignant point about, when Libya was in this crisis, where were all the other African, nations? And I remember reading somewhere that, at the time of the Gaddafi rule, Libya had the highest living standard in regards to, people going to school, was the best nation in Africa. And so just kind of, I don't want someone to walk away and be like, oh, it's because Africa is not unified. Because if they were the best and still suffering like this, how would you expect the other nations? So it's not like we just decided that they don't want to help Libya. I believe that it's very complicated. The Western world have, them wrapped around their finger, unfortunately. And so I just wonder what kind of more realistic expectations can we have? Because my thought would be that if any other African nation tries to intervene, the West is just going to wipe them out, pretty much. So what is a realistic expectation, realistically?
Thanks, that's a long question. Anyone else would like to come in? One second.
Helen, I was very relieved to hear that you're hopeful with regard to, thank you much for a great speech. And it's nice to hear that there is some hope and that some of the people who, as you said, you said they had gone to the other side, they're now coming back, and some of the tribal leaders are coming together, and that's really great. I just wonder what you think the catalyst for all this was. Sukan quite often refers to the Arab Spring, and I remember hearing Dan once say that the West didn't plan the Arab Spring, but it planned for it. I can remember, I don't know what you think about this at all, but I can remember totally by accident coming across something in 2010, October 2010. There was a Pan-Afro-Arab meeting in Sirte with Mubarak, Gaddafi, Ben Ali, and all African and Arab leaders. A huge, huge conference which the West didn't cover at all. That was in October 2010. What I read, and I'm sure I read this correctly, was that Mubarak and Gaddafi had said to Obama that they would give him 2 months to have negotiations with Netanyahu in Palestine about Israeli settlements. Now, that was October 2010. By the next year, 2011, Ben Ali had gone, Mubarak was being got at severely, and then later on in the year, what happened in Libya. Do you think that was a catalyst at all?
Thank you, Sheila. Anyone else would like to come in? I'd like to give Dr. Camila the right to reply.
I'm really disappointed from some African countries who supported the other party. Maybe they given instruction from America, US, to do that, but really Libya was a good member in Africa, trying to be a good member. Why they treated our nation like that? Why they supported the other party? They know that the other parties hate Africa, and the excuse of that Gaddafi gave lots of money to Africa. They are excuse and didn't help his people. That's what I'm trying to say.
But do you think that that was done on purpose? You just said the opposing party hate Africa. Right?
They said that.
All I'm saying is I don't think it's as easy as someone choosing which friend to play with in the playground. I think it's a lot more complicated. I think someone is threatening. If you're trying to hook it up, look what we've just done to other leaders who have tried to make a stance. We've killed them. So what I'm saying is it's not that easy, otherwise we would be in the situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. Just I would like far away from the Africa and the reaction and the proactive. Actually, I wanted to ask or draw the attention of people here and everybody for the simple thing about the war in Libya in 2011, which is all about the claim of, the NATO allies, about protecting civilians. And I would like everybody in this room, after they leave, they just Google the report was issued by International Amnesty titled Unacknowledged Deaths, which was about the civilians were killed by NATO directly in Major and other cities in Libya, were tens of children among these victims of NATO. So what happens to these crimes against humanity? And what the international community and the International Criminal Court has done about these crimes? Nothing. And actually we are suffering them from the city of Sirte, which is now controlled by Daesh, by what's called Islamic State. Islamic State is now supplied by vehicles, American vehicles called Hemveo. I don't know, it's military vehicles supplied to them, and it was a mistake. It's another American mistake in the country. Now my friends, my family, and the whole people in Libya suffering from shortage of the basics life necessities, from fuel, food, electricity, and everything. The whole country is going, has been from the collapse of the regime, the ex-regime, till now, suffering from basic humanitarian things, even health. Now so many hospitals are closing. So many doctors are captured by these Islamic groups and even other militias and gangs for money or for anything else. So where's the international community? We are suffering. The people are suffering there. They are killed, and the Western media, unfortunately, cares about only the migration that coming to Europe, and they want to block the way toward the European capitals. And now we are suffering in our country. And where's the ethical and legal responsibilities of this, what's called, which I don't believe in, the international community? So that's the question. If it was about protecting civilians, then what happens to what the International Amnesty finds about the victims of NATO itself, which they counted more than 100. I think 30 children and other tens of women among these victims. So what's happened to that? I mean, that's very, very, for me at least, and just one example about the ethical responsibility of the West. And so to say that for the West, in terms of governments and people as well, because governments are accountable or should be accountable to their people who elected them. And now they should draw attention to these crimes and what they should do legally. Sorry for taking the most time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else want to wrap up? Okay, we're going to go.
Can I just make one
Yes,
comment?
please, Dr. Kamil. Please, Dr. Munir, keep it very brief. Because we're running out of time.
Okay. Yeah, the brother who spoke about Africa and the migrants, he reminded me by one of Gaddafi's speeches when he said, Europe now complaining from a few thousand of migrants who migrated to Europe because they want better life, and they forget about themselves. They smuggle loads of African wealth, which worth billions of dollars to their countries, and they don't want to help Africa just to give a few millions to Africa to be developed and to stop the migration to Europe. That's one of Gaddafi's speeches.
Dr. Moussa, on behalf of my government of Angola and one of the ministers, we all support you. Today is the great day of my life, seeing you the great liberator of Africa. Our brother leader, Muhammad, help Angola, all southern countries, and to reply to this level of all respect from Africa. I don't accept her way, because we Africans had a lot of, in terms of troops, or even the moral assistance, and we didn't have that. It was a betrayal of a lot of Nigerians, South Africans, I'm not saying all of us, the government, they all are called house slaves, They are disgusting, they are hyenas, they are traitors. They worship the evil masters. That's what I have to say. And today is the great day of my life, being and seeing you. So thank you. Shukran.
Okay, this often happens, people start speaking, and everyone else starts speaking.
Sorry,
so please keep it brief.
Yeah, just 20 to 9. Assalamu alaikum. And so just to this point, I wanted to raise something. Yes. Libya now, especially after 5 years of killing Gaddafi, Abdullah alayhi, Sheikh Gaddafi, now Libya realized the truth. And this is their own example. And this example has been seen before in Iraq, Afghanistan. The shame and the failure of the international community to provide any help. Now we believe as Libyans that the Russian community doesn't provide any help, it provides only instructions to the nations which are struggling to build themselves, to educate their people, to secure their countries. Libya used to be one of the main sources for African countries, used to be one of the main sources of Arab countries like Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, all these being fed from Libya, and they can't deny that, any of them. And now, the Arab League was the first enemy to Libya, adopted the decision to destroy Libya. And nowadays we hear that Arab League come again and to protect Libya. I don't think we are now reached the point where we can't trust anyone. Libyans, we have to be united, we have to recover, we have to get back to ourselves, otherwise we'll be with the flags in the international community, in the world, scattered. Nobody will look after us, nobody will see us, nobody will consider our situation, we'll be just like Palestinians. And this is the great example and the live example is just right now. So we are as Libyans, we have to sort our problems. Otherwise, to think about America, Gaddafi said it, the main corruption is in the United Nations. And we believe Gaddafi said that, and this is the truth. If anyone to play with politics words or political words to say this is no, this is the truth, we like it or we don't like it, this is something else, but this is the reality, and we do agree with Gaddafi, and Gaddafi is not a person to be independent from his mentality, no. Gaddafi is school, and he told us, and he made us aware of our surrounding. Even those who are against Gaddafi, they write everything that Gaddafi believes in. We don't need Americans, we don't need Jewish in Libya, they're written those who support sabotage, what's called the 17th February, what's called this rubbish between happened in Libya. This happened, and these people are an idiot. They said exactly what Gaddafi said in 40 years. They still imitate the same statements, which he used to say. So they are ignorant. They're being used as gloves, as masks, as they are foreigners to the international mafia to steal Libyan wealth and to destroy Libyan health and Libyan social structures, especially to be Libyans never sit to each other or to meet each other or to come together on one table. And this is the main point of the game, which is being played in Libya. I'm sorry for being long and for being aggressive as well. So.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the panel to be brief in summarizing their comments in light of the last round of contributions, and then Dr. Moussa to make his final comments. I just wanted to ask one question, because Libyan brothers and the Libyan sisters are less active on Facebook, it seems, but the Libyan brothers, you only discuss amongst each other in Arabic on Facebook, which is difficult because the translate machine on Facebook is very bad. So you might say something very elaborate and eloquent, the translation is just nonsensical. But the question is this, sorry, to Dr. Moussa, if you have time to comment on this. What happened in those 2 weeks of protests? We saw some of the videos, we saw some of the marches, the speeches all across Libya. It was very inspiring to anti-imperialists across the world and those who fought the Jamahiriya. What happened? We know they came out because of the death sentence. It was a beautiful moment. For 2 weeks, day after day, they came out. Can you give us some reflection about what that contributed and what the path forward is? Dan, you got anything to say?
Yeah, just very briefly.
Okay, you guys have to be extremely brief. We've really gone quite long. So please, Dan, and then Hafsa, then I'll ask Dr. Moussa.
Yeah, well, this might sort of help sort of set the frame for what Hafsa's going to say as well, because I have sympathies, to be honest, with both Hafsa's comment and the comment of the sister who critiqued Hafsa's comments. It is very difficult, and I think we should always bear in mind how skillfully the imperialists actually maneuvered and manipulated that resolution and the aftermath of it, and also realize the content of the UN resolution 1973. The first two points 1 and 2 on that resolution, which the African Union lobbied for and actually said its support and the support of, I think, the 3 African countries that were on the Security Council at the time. They said they kind of lobbied successfully for these first 2 points to be inserted, and they said that was their condition of the support for the resolution, were that the AU would be allowed to try and negotiate a ceasefire, and that basically this would be the ultimate, the kind of main priority, and that no military action should be taken by NATO, essentially, until that had been exhausted, right? That the AU would be given a chance to negotiate a ceasefire, and only when those avenues have been exhausted would kind of outright hostilities be able to commence. Now, on the one hand, you can blame African countries and blame anyone observing the scene that, look, it was obvious whatever the UN resolution said, the fact that there was those 3 words in it, buried deep in it, all necessary measures, that was obviously just the green light for NATO to do what the hell it wanted, and everyone should have seen that and recognized that, and that's true. That is true. Nevertheless, we should realize that the resolution, if it was actually adhered to, and if those elements that were inserted by the African Union were adhered to, then none of what happened could have happened. Actually, the war that was conducted by NATO was not authorized under the grounds of that resolution. So it is difficult. There was maneuvering, and we should also, as Sukan said, the enemy is imperialism, and we can discuss the different failures of our strategy and the failure of different countries to oppose it. But that is the enemy, and if we're discussing failures, Russia had the veto, the AU never had the veto, no African country had the veto on that resolution.
Russia's not Africa.
So let's blame Russia as well.
I'm not saying I'm saying everyone's got lessons to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if Africa was not, as the sister pointed out, necessarily in the strongest position of those non-imperialist powers to have actually made the decisive difference. So I have sympathies for both of those views, but I just think it's important to bear those kind of subtleties in mind.
Thanks, Dan.
Can I start? Well, Russia and China failed, obviously, Libya, but neither of these countries are African, and at the end of the day, it was the responsibility of Africa. What could Africa have done? Well, remember January, the Charlie Hebdo killings? Scores of every African journalist drew cartoons in solidarity with the slain cartoonists. Every African leader flew out to France to support the 12 slain journalists. Every African leader condemned and issued a statement for 12 French racist journalists who had a front cover comparing black people to monkeys and thinking that in the name of freedom of speech, that was something to do. African leaders and African people supported a racist publication and did not come out in solidarity with Libya. How many African people came out in solidarity and marched in front of a Libyan embassy to support their Libyan brothers? How many do you know, how many Africans do you know in the West, based in the West or in Africa, did anything to support or to condemn the Libyan catastrophe? It goes far beyond just saying that it's not a critique, and I understand what you're saying, and obviously we're having a conversation, but I think we need to be aware of where we went wrong. African people stepped up to show solidarity to the Charlie Hebdo journalists, but they didn't. They completely failed Libya, and I think it's a very important point. They could have done it from a social point of view. People should have done it from their own initiative, and of course governments failed. And just another point, President Wade of Senegal was the first one to take the lead in attacking Libya. Now, when you know the history of Africa and African slavery, off the coast of Dakar you have Gorée Island. This is where slaves were placed before being shipped to Africa. The symbolism of Dakar, the western capital of Dakar, actually taking the lead in attacking a fellow African country is particularly painful for anyone who has the interest of the African continent at heart. And I think, regardless of, again, just to point again that we have the resources to actually make a stand. As I said, Africa is a wealthy continent. It can stand on its own 2 feet, providing it says, here we are, here you have, and here we are a force to be reckoned with. As I said, Africa failed on that front, and it's all our responsibility. So a lot could have been done.
Yeah, I know, Margaret, what's the right?
I'm going to be brief.
Go on.
Again, I don't have all the answers, but I remember, for example, in Nigeria, when the whole "where are the missing girls," that tragedy that happened, and there were even Nigerians complaining that Nigerian leaders weren't even standing for something that was happening in their own nation. Now, again, just taking it from that standpoint, I mean, I don't know about maybe they're that corrupt, they hate their own nation, but I don't think that's the case. All I'm saying is I believe it's a bit more intricate than that. If they weren't even able to stand up, part of me feels like maybe they were pressured into not speaking about it.
Sure.
Also, the coverage with regards to the support for Charlie Hebdo, they were putting it on BBC. People were also marching for Libya. They don't put that on BBC. So let's not pretend like no one did anything. You understand what I'm saying? And I just want to reiterate, again, my point that I know is that when Gaddafi was ruling, Libya was one of the best nations. Africa it's struggling not because it doesn't have resources, but because people have their hand on the resources. So let's not pretend like I just have food and I just decided I didn't want to give it to Libya. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So of course, and there are corrupt leaders who would very much rather just maybe look after not even their own country but themselves, understandably. I take that, but let's not make it seem like as if we they just decided to exercise Libya because we felt like it. You understand? I mean, people in their own nations are dying.
But I'm just saying, there are lessons to be learned, that's all.
Of course, definitely. But let's not pretend like that's the case.
I really think that the real problem is down to the same. The control of information, that kind of lies within talking. If you look at the way there's a monopoly of information, and this war was before information, the level of information. So if they're propagating that, the level of the corporate media controlling the world's media, then get the African nations, African people did not know what was going on, frankly speaking, because they were being told the same lies. And African ruling classes are comparable classes. They are in partnership with various powers. Let's be frank about it. The majority of them, many of them, I mean, look at it. Because I come from Kenya. I know the Kenyan government is very close to the US, for example. Uganda is very close to the US. If you talk about different people, different groups, there is a narrative of radical Africanism. There's a narrative of Pan-Africanism. There's a narrative of revolutionary Africanism. And the narrative never gets through. So it's control of information is very important as well. What we have here is about giving a different narrative to people here. It's going to get to the wider public as well. Thank you.
Okay, so the event has suddenly turned into a critique and a deconstruction of Africa, which I don't think is the focus of the event. Now, Dr. Moussa, I'd like you to make your concluding comments, and I think you're best placed to actually make concluding comments. I suppose there's two things. If you don't mind, the audience, brothers and sisters here, I would like to focus your response on two things which I think have come out. One is, you probably may want to make some comments about the role of African countries in the African Union, because I know Zuma and the African Union were shuttling to Benghazi and Tripoli. They nearly got lynched in Benghazi. I still remember that. The cars were attacked in Benghazi and they wanted to kill them, Zuma and the other African Union people who intervened. But obviously there was failure in that regard as well. So perhaps touch upon that. And then also, if you could touch upon the protest and how the Green Resistance seeks to go forward in an African context as well. Do you have constructive dialogue with anyone in Africa? Because this is the nitty-gritty, the ABC. The brother who made his, apologize for making his angry contribution, it's okay. But, you know, obviously the Green Resistance is the most functional political formation in Libya and in the diaspora. But we can only move forward in the resistance in Libya if there is some regional backing and support. I don't think we're able to move forward really. But anyway, feel free to what you would like to say. But that's my kind of request. You have about 5 to 10 minutes to make your concluding remarks. Then I'll close the meeting if that's okay. Please, Brother Moussa, you're on mute at the moment, I think.
No, I'm not.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I've discovered something new about our sister Hafsa. She's really terrifying and scary. And when she believes in something, you see, I'm the diplomat and the politician. Sometimes I say nice things, I kind of color my statements, but sometimes I also say some hardcore statements. It depends on the situation, but I have to admit, I'm not just a fighter, I'm not just on the ground fighter, I'm a politician and we deal with. But she seems to be the pure revolutionary fighter, and she says what is in her heart, and she's angry, and I respect that anger. Anger is an extremely important source of energy for our struggle, so keep it up. You say things that I do not dare say.
Story of my life.
I'm going to deny that I even heard them. Kind of blame it on Skype and technology. But I understand completely her position, and I also understand the position of the people who are trying to defend the African Union, and because they want to be hopeful. I have to be honest with you with regards to one thing. The Green Resistance, and this is why it's strong resistance. We are not, and I never mentioned in all of my contributions with you, we are not relying on any foreign assistance on our struggle to regain Libya. We are not relying on the Arab League, the African Union, the United Nations, or even on our negotiations with the West. All of the success we have achieved inside Libya is through social, political, and societal reconstruction of the country. And if you talk to our Libyan comrades in with you there, everyone will tell you a story about how many families, tribes, cities, groups of Libyans are coming and have been coming back to join the Green Resistance around the country. And I do not claim any particular great role in this. It's a collective work of the Greens, of the children of Al-Fatah revolution, and it's a very complicated network of negotiation, of talk, dialogue, and also I have to say that this is one of our main assets. The terrible situation Libya is in brought many Libyans back to us. We did not lose many Libyans anyway, even in the war, but now people are more one heart, one conscience, and one mind. They are not organized as they should be, completely under one leadership and one structure, clear and solid. But this is happening. The problem we suffer from is that the West works against this every day. And the militias supported by the West work against any sort of recognition of Green Libyans and Green Resistance. And they are using weapons, terror, money, everything they have against the coming back of Green Libya. The African Union is weak internationally and unable to provide strategies and techniques to deal with African problems, and it's failing on many levels. But this does not mean that there are no good African leaders and honest African politicians who tried to help us and tried to break through the wall. It's part of being under the domination or the dominance of imperialism. As for the African people themselves, I advise each and every one of you to read Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth, and other books to see what being imperialized. My Algerian friend now is smiling because he knows what I'm talking about. When you are colonized and dominated, something happens inside you, something breaks, and this is what these evil people do. They break people from the inside. They break you with poverty, starvation, with fear, with inferiority complexes, with everything. So it's not easy. Africa suffers from many problems, but I assure you, Africa has good men, has good women. They need to organize and they need to understand the truth of what is happening in their continent, and then something will happen. But for us, the green resistance of Libya, we are regaining the country from within. And I think we are going to give a good example to our African brothers, how to be strong from inside. Another friend asked about the catalysts for the whole Arab Spring and Libya. Well, in a previous talk, I mentioned that there is a misguided concept, Sukan, and this is for everyone, that please listen to this because this is extremely important. And I was an eyewitness to this. Many people have this misguided concept that the Arab Spring took the West by surprise, and then the West tried to utilize it. This is a lie, basically, and this is a misguided concept. The West knew about the so-called Arab Spring. The West organized and planned part of it, not every single detail of it. In the case of Libya, it doesn't come clearer than this. We were talking to the French in January, before the events in Libya. We were negotiating with them. We were talking with them about their support for a possible uprising in some Libyan tribes or some Libyan cities. And we knew that they were giving money and diplomatic support and media support for a possible rebellion, so-called rebellion in some parts of Libya. And the French admitted, and they were talking, in a transparent way with us. And they said very simply and very directly, Gaddafi, not just Gaddafi has to leave. They said to us, this is January, a whole month before the event started. In January, everything was fine and fantastic in the country. They said, not just Gaddafi has to leave. Gaddafi's dream, Gaddafi's green revolution, Gaddafi's projects, they refused to have any green Libyans in Libya. They refused to have any green Libyans in the Libyan government. They put to take rid of the African dreams of Libya, the Arab dreams of Libya, the anti-imperialist dreams of Libya. So the people who negotiated with France came to us at the end of January disappointed. And they said to us, guys, forget it. The French and the Europeans, they want green Libya dead. You either have to accept that and run for your life, or you have to fight to the end. And I was there, I witnessed this, and I knew that we were coming to something really substantial. But, of course, we had hopes. We thought maybe through the African Union and Russia and China, and through political gaming, maybe we can avoid the disaster. But, unfortunately, we have not been able to. Is there something else I should touch upon? For the protests, you asked me about what happened during the 2 weeks. Well, this is a true and genuine success of our movement as a green retreat. In the 2 weeks, everyone, of course, around the world, in the West, wanted to believe. They knew they were wrong, but they wanted so badly to believe that the Greens do not exist anymore, that they have finished us off, that it's all a false dream in the hearts of some men and women to have Libya back to the green flag. But without weapons, without money, without international support, without Arab support, without African support, thousands upon thousands of Libyans came on the streets in all of the geography, the geography of Libya, not in one concentrated part, green part of Libya. In Benghazi, which is, a city completely dominated by NATO's agents. In Al-Manj, which is a city also dominated by, in terms of military, dominated, not in terms of the population. In Ajilat, in Ajmer, in Sirt, in Sabha, in many other places. And these people, for the first time, came with their faces exposed to the cameras. Many people noticed that I talked about it, because people used to come out sometimes completely covered in fear for their lives. Now people don't care anymore. They came out, not just that, they stood in front of the cameras, mobile phone cameras, and they read out open letters to the world. They read out their declaration of green faith, and they named they mentioned their names and their family names, and this is something after years of oppression in Libya, and after years of being dominated by these gangs. If this is not a victory, a moral and on-the-ground victory, I don't know what it could be. And we, of course, lost. The number is not very high, thanks be to God, but we lost between 15 and 20 people were massacred, were killed by the armed militias in Sabha and in Sirt especially. So to Sister Hafsa and also to the honorable members of the audience, yes, I am hopeful because I work on the ground and we know what is happening in Libya, and we are not relying on any international scene, international community. We are relying on the hearts and the arms of the Libyan people. We are relying on their resistance, on their struggle, and we know that within a particular time frame, you will hear the good news and you will see the steps towards a green, independent and free Libya with the help of the vast majority of the Libyan population. Let me, before I finish, just thank every member of the audience who can. Let me thank my Libyan comrades who are in exile in Britain, but the ones that are exiled, lived in Britain for 15 years, take me there and I will live happy. But thanks also to the non-Libyans, our British, or whatever nationality you are from, who are also with us today. I'm honored, I'm always honored to talk to people. I'm terribly sorry, Sukant knows that I'm always jumping from country to country and continent to continent. And then he phones me and says, please set up Skype somewhere and talk to us. And sometimes I have to rent a flat or go out to a hotel or be somewhere with a good connection. But I'm honored, this is my duty, and I'm happy to see these faces, and hopefully I will see you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. Before we go, a few things. He's left us. He's out. He's gone. And before anyone asks me, I don't know where he is, I don't know where he's been, and I don't know where he's going, and I'm not interested, and I never ask him, so don't ever ask me. But just a few more comments. Now, the whole point of our work is to build bridges and to build alliances. The whole point of the enemy's work is to stir the pot and to destabilize our relationships and to further split us apart. We've gone through trauma and we will go through more trauma. We've gone through destruction of our countries, and the fact is we will see more destruction of our countries. That's the reality, as well as we build up our capacity for liberation across the world as well. I have to thank a few people. I have to thank one of the leaders of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Bob Brown, who's been supportive of our work and directly congratulates us for this event this evening. He was a very active member of the Mataba. I have to thank our comrade in Guyana, Gerard Pereira, who was another excellent advocate of the cause of the Mataba and the Libyan Jamahiriya and the Pan-African causes around that as well. Many people are admiring the work we're doing in London, but we need this work to expand. And part of this work is for you to support us. And frankly, people who know me, I'm really bad at asking for money and bad at funding strategies, because I think we should do things for the sake and the love and dedication of our people and no financial incentive. Unfortunately, a few costs have to be met, so I'm going to pass around this hopefully magical red box. It's £5 suggested entry. Anything more than that would be really, really appreciated. So with that, I think Moussa Ibrahim has gone, but one concrete thing, still 4 years on, we haven't managed to do is set up a justice campaign, either for the people of Tawarga or for the many detainees and people kidnapped in Libya. I again plead to you, and it's perhaps my personality, that year after year, hardly any response comes. But it's still a live issue. It's still a primary issue of our global struggle. You can see members of the Libyan diaspora here. We can work with them. But some concrete things, there's two concrete things. We need a justice campaign here that focuses on some particular families who've been impacted and killed by the NATO bombing and the Allied death squads. That's one thing we need. We need a justice campaign. Whether that's Tawarga, whether that's this family or that family, we can decide together collectively. The second thing we really need, and I'll discuss this with Moussa in the future as well, we need reliable, centralized news in the English and French language from Libya. We really need that, because we still don't have that now, and it's a really pathetic situation, to be frank, that we haven't developed that. But these are the two relatively small things we really need your direct, or anyone you know, need their help in developing. That's a justice campaign here. Then we can really start knocking on doors and getting people to support and raising their attention to this. And secondly, is the English and French language. It could be the Libyan Resistance Report, whatever you want to call it, a fortnightly newsletter online that people can say, this is reliable, this is from our comrades in Libya and Tunisia and Egypt and further afield, etc. With that, thank you, brothers and sisters. Please do donate kindly and generously, and I hope you can stay in touch with us and become more a greater part of our work. Thank you to Amy and Ali for filming as well. Thank you, everyone.